Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I'm Mr. East Forest. This week, I have a conversation with Colin Frangicetto, and he's someone who I met from Michael of the Third Eye Drops podcast, and he's like, I think you guys should meet, and I was like, you got it. And he's an awesome guy, really open and gentle, good, smart energy. He's a musician and an artist. You should check out his artwork in the show notes down there. He's extremely talented. But he was one of the guitarists, or is one of the guitarists in Circa Survive, I should say, which is a band. So he's out there doing the music thing, such as myself, and it's always good to talk to him. We got in some really interesting stuff about synchronicity. And I don't think it was like, the usual type conversation about it. I mean, we got into some interesting layers of what that's all about. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy it and enjoy getting to know Colin. I wanted to let you know about February 12th. That is a virtual event that I'm going to be premiering, the world premiere live listening event of a new journey modern music that I do. That's on February 12th. And February 16th will be in Las Vegas. That's in real life, as well as the first week of April will be in Dublin and London. eastforest.org for all of that stuff. And thank you to everyone on our council. East Forest Council is a way to support this podcast. I mean, we do whatever we want to do there, but we do fun things. I share a lot of demos, and this week, this month, actually, I shared a few things. I shared an early version, an advanced look at the Doorway 3 extended track that came out. And I also found an interview I did on this podcast a long time ago called Contemplative. Damn, that's hard. Contemplative. You have to relax to say it. Contemplative Light podcast. And anyway, it's not something that you could find anywhere else. And so we put it up on things like Patreon, and I think you might enjoy it. But thank you for the support. Everything's at eastforest.org. And thanks for saying hi, team at eastforest.org or on the socials. And looking forward to seeing some of you as we get out there on the road and get back to things. I'm just emerging from trying to install basically a spatial audio, like an Atmos, it's what's called, Atmos mixing setup. And I'm not going to bore you with the details because believe me, it is a deep rabbit hole of weirdness out there, as basically there's not one approach, is the way to put it. And it's crazy. So my friend Steve-O and I were trying to set it all up in here and just wrapping your head around, like, should you go this way with it or that way? Or why isn't this working? This new software does and this doesn't. And we're not there yet. But it was just one of those extremely technical time period. So I'm looking forward to some more creativity in music and a little bit of travel coming up as well. Just hope everyone's staying healthy and safe. We know everyone's going through this in different ways right now. And I'm just praying for grace for everyone and that you're healthy, or as healthy as you can be, or on your way to perfect and vibrant health as we speak. Okay, let's get into this wonderful conversation with our new friend, Colin Frangicetto. Here it is. Colin, it's nice to meet you. Although I'm in the far north with the Aurora Borealis, I prefer to be on that nice beach that you're at.
You're in the far north forest tonight? Or?
That's what it looks like. Yeah. For those who are watching this visually, man, you were recommended to me by our friend Third Eye Drops.
Yes.
Senor, and I just thought anyone that I already jive with, she's like, you should meet this so-and-so. I say, sure. And nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well. Thanks for having me.
I dug a little bit into your world, but I kind of almost didn't want to go too deep, but I saw some really amazing artwork of all different, everything from pen and ink to painting to installations. That was quite impressive. I'd like to ask a few things about out of the gate, but you also are a musician, and you're in a band. I think you have your own project as well, but Circa Survive seems to be the main one.
Yeah.
You play guitar and other things?
I do. I play guitar and other things. I play guitar in the band, and I guess I play a little bit of you know, electronics, keyboard stuff.
Don't we all? Yeah.
Yeah. I play a little bit of that in the band as well now. But
Cool.
I kind of tinker with everything. I started on drums, and then
Oh, really?
yeah, when I was younger, I started on drums, and it was kind of one of those things where I I had a neighbor who's a drummer, and he was always playing, and I guess he had a bunch of sets, and I just had mentioned to my parents how I thought drums were really cool, and then he was getting rid of one of his drum sets super cheap, and so I just got this drum set, and I was like, okay, and for a while I didn't really do that much with it. I just kind of had it. I was always into guitar, but
You picked
then
the cool instruments, guitar,
yeah,
drums. Yeah, I was
yeah.
like saxophone, recorder, and piano. It's like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't do it, but like basically the kit sat there for a while until I met the right people in high school, and they were just like kids starting a punk hardcore band and needed a drummer, and I was like, I don't know how to play yet, but I'll figure it
Perfect.
out.
Yeah. Perfect. So where was that you grew up, and where are you now?
Actually, we've come full circle. So I grew up in like Langhorne, Pennsylvania, which is like 20 minutes outside of Philadelphia. And then have kind of lived all over, lived in New York, lived in the Bay Area, San Jose, lived in Portland for many years, and then just recently moved back to the Philadelphia area from Portland like 7 months ago, 8 months ago.
Oh,
So
I was in New York and Portland too. I grew up in Oregon, spent a long time in New York, but I also lived in Portland for like many years in the
yeah,
Northeast zone.
nice.
Um,
Yeah, us too.
yeah, whereabouts? I was on
We were
12th
we were
and
close to the
Killingsworth.
airport-ish, so we were pretty far out there, like
Yeah, yeah.
100, 122nd,
Mm-hmm.
and northeast. So, yeah, we were out there, but it was great. We lived there for 5 years, and then prior to that, we were in the Bay for, well, my wife was born and raised in San Jose, and then I lived with her in San Jose for like almost 3 years before we moved to
Okay.
Portland.
So you're a really creative dude, and is for you, is it sort of, is there a particular output that excites you the most? Are you finding like feels like your closest through line to an expression of who you are, or is it you just kind of like to do it all? Well, I know you like to do it all, but
Yeah.
like, music for me, I always thought I used to do some other things too, and I was like, yeah, but music just feels like this direct kind of expression. So I like doing that as opposed to things I need to get hired to do or is more collaborative to do. Or I even like, for instance, doing construction, which I find to be very creative
Yeah.
and problem solving. It's kind of like music, but a very different muscle to exercise.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of obsessive in general, so I get really into things, any kind of novel way to that I can be creative and express myself. I get sort of sucked into that vortex, and then kind of just overdose on it, and then eventually it just becomes a part, like a tool, or like just part of my bigger understanding of like what I'm trying to do with this consistent ritual, which is just like creation from nothing. That's like my obsession. Like, oh, let's just take something, take a space where there is nothing, and then let's put something there and build upon it and see where it can go. And I get really into that journey and have tried to replicate that in many different fields, I guess. But
What was
I
the
think
last thing you overdosed on?
last thing I overdosed on was probably I'm still currently in it, like this the whole like digital art, like NFT craziness.
Oh,
Very interesting, super fascinating digital scarcity concept, and just yeah. So I'm trying to understand that world, and then also I think that drew my interest deeper into digital art making, glitch making, manipulation of analog materials in digital ways, and that's kind of bled over even into my music, sound making stuff. It all starts. It has been starting to make sense lately. Like, oh, all these things are kind of related. Whereas I think there were a bunch of times in my life where I tried to like separate everything, because it felt like the sum of them all somehow tainted the quality perception or something like that. It was like the Bo Jackson effect, It's like, this guy doesn't even care. He's just playing whatever, and he just wants to do it all. Fuck this guy. And I kind of felt like self-conscious about that kind of thing early on, and then now I'm starting to realize like it was kind of like training for this day and age, because I feel like it's almost completely normal, if not required, for creatives to be able to wear a bunch of different hats these days. So yeah, but I mean, I can get a little like sidetracked, and I have like severe ADHD. But to answer your question, like, what do I feel like expresses the most, like the most direct line for me? It's visual art. I think for many, many years it was music, but I think, and it still can be, and especially performing, performing music, with my bandmates, can be absolutely like transcendent, and it feels like that at times can be the most direct line for me to feel, create like a through line between creativity and spirituality, like that's where I feel that probably the most is like those live experiences, which has been, lacking severely in the last few years. But nonetheless, most of my life, I would say half of my life has been spent collecting those kind of experiences. But for me,
it's collaborative, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you hit, it's sort of like everything's amplified when you hit those moments with others. It's amazing, and absolutely can be done on your own, like drawing or painting, and wow, or making music on your own. But there is something special about the alchemy of like, oh my God, it's like all five of us, there it is. And not only that, but there's people witnessing it. That amplifies it even more. That's sort of maybe in some ways what engendered it in the first place, is like that heightened sense of attention.
Yeah, for sure. And the only reason I would even say visual art over that is just getting even more nitty gritty about it, in that, so much of my life now has been spent with these four other individuals, and collaborating. And I think a part of myself had to die in order to be the most effective collaborator I could be. So for me, the most direct line to me, myself, my song is visual art, because it's so solitary, and it's so meditative and reflective, but these days it's hard for me to even see like a really strong line blur, kind of separating music and art. It all feels like art. It all feels like sort of like connected, like I was saying. So
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I saw some smatterings. You have a podcast too, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It's kind of on pause right now, but it still very much exists.
It's
And
got a lot of episodes up. What's it called?
It's called The Cosmic Nod.
And I saw some stuff in there about psychedelics, like as some of your subject matter. So I'm
sure.
guessing that plays a big part in like who you are as a human.
Oh yeah.
And that plays a big part in who I am as a human. Not everything, of course. I mean,
No.
but it has been like significant milestones for me, sort of moments of revelation that showed me through felt experience things I had hoped for or intuited. But not only showed it to me times a million what I thought it could be, in a sense. Like, or this infinite, these dimensional expansions of like understanding. It's like, I understand so much more than I wanted to understand. but it's almost untranslatable except through like music and art and these heightened moments. I think that's why we do it. It's kind of a connective tissue to these other extra dimensional spaces that are beyond the boundary conditions of like this world.
Yeah. Um, Completely concur. And I mean, I guess there's a multitude of reasons I found myself drawn to psychedelics, and then drawn back to them, and then drawn back to them. I've gone through many cycles where it's kind of like it almost feels like school or something, where I go through these concentrated periods of time where I'm very focused on journeys and personal growth, and then I'll just take a big break, and it's kind of like that is. I would say, I think a lot of times we think of integration as like this very short period after the trip, and I think that that's definitely a thing. There's scientific evidence that there's like a window that these things can be really kind of compacted into a long-term absorption. But I also think that for me, integration is like this. There's like a super cycle of it as well, where it really extends out, and it starts to be it's happening almost like on a subconscious level that I have to allow in order for me to go back to the altar, if you will, like in a healthy spot. And I guess there are always times where it's like, this is as good as it's gonna get, and I need this right now. I'm not at my tippy top shape as far as healthiness goes, but like I try to be mentally prepared, and for me, being mentally prepared often means like has enough time gone by for me to really absorb the lessons of the last experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, extremely important to me, and the things that I've learned about myself and the nature of reality and the nature of time specifically, I would say are to just like, I've never been the same,
Yeah,
you
right.
know?
And yet it's like, and someone who's never maybe experienced that, and they'd be like, so what is it? What is it? And you're just like, nothing. Like it's like, in some ways, like I remember after the first ayahuasca experience I had, and the next morning, I was seeing someone else who was in the ceremony, and we looked at each other in the eyes, and there's just this looking, and there was nothing else to say. Just through that, I was like everything. I was like,
Yeah.
and but in some ways that's not deficient. Like when I'm saying that implies like that actually was everything. That was enough. And I know it
hmm
sounds silly, but it sounds like for you, like talk us through a bit about like the things that you face as challenges as a person, and the ways in which either creativity or the psychedelic practice, or more importantly, like what are the ways you integrate these into your life to kind of feel that you're on that beach right now behind you, and it's just the waves are doing their thing, and it's just all good.
Yeah. Um, well, the challenges I go through, again, I think probably like anyone, there's a multitude of them, and the ones that really, that the ones that called me to do like medicine work, are the ones that were the trickiest to like untangle, and it's like aspects of my personality that I felt like I wanted to change, or just understand in a deeper sense, but couldn't really wrap my mind around. Like, for instance, I would say the most prevalent thing that I have tried to work on as much as possible, and something that's kind of plagued me, is this kind of imposter syndrome. This feeling of anytime I put anything out into the world, I will feel this sense of vulnerability to attack, and kind of this feeling of like, at any moment someone's going to say like, you're not actually an artist, you're not actually a musician, like you're not this thing that you think you are, and you're not worthy of my time or my energy. And I think that's totally a reasonable, at least the last part is a reasonable thing. Like, I don't expect everyone to give me their energy or their time or their attention, you know?
You
But I
don't
think,
want that. You
no,
imagine?
ugh, no. Um, in fact, many times in my life, like my band has kind of done a lot of stuff, and we did the major label thing for a little bit there, and we've had a lot of these, like, you know, get up to the mountaintop and take a look, and then kind of be like, I don't know, So there's been a lot of times in my life where I felt really grateful that we never had that like smash single that, made us famous for a week. It's like, I'm pretty happy with what we have actually. But I think just this sense, even like, say just interacting with someone like you, like in the, at my worst, there'd be this thing where I wouldn't maybe trust the intention behind you reaching out, or I would say even more, a better example is when I was doing my podcast at Full Tilt, and I had to reach out to people and ask them to come on,
Yeah.
and just that ego dance that happens when you feel like you're bothering somebody by asking them to tell their life story, or like, just this feeling of like, the dance of like promoting it and all that stuff, it would just give me severe anxiety at times where I just felt like, who am I to be asking this of people? Like, who am I to expect anyone to even listen to this? And you go down this like
Yeah.
spiral of like, it's pretty common, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it also can
Especially
be
the
plaguing.
promoting stuff. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
promoting it inherently is just feels gross, And in
Yeah.
some ways, when you're an artist these days, it's kind of it's just part of the picture. You're always kind of, I mean, everybody's their own PR agent on
Yes.
social media now, and it's like we're in this weird fun house where actually everyone's promoting themselves. Used to be just certain people
Yes.
you knew, like, oh, you have a business or you're an artist, but now it's like everyone
Yeah.
is promoting their life and whatever they want to tell their story. And literally, it's all done through a filter, and the irony couldn't be crazier to me.
Yeah.
And then the fact that you speak about what I'm sure a lot of us feel, I've felt it, this imposter syndrome. We all feel that. So then not only are we promoting ourselves, but then we feel insufficient.
Guilty, embarrassed, all this stuff.
Yeah, man, I feel that. So, but at the same time, it doesn't stop you from creating. I mean, I think what you're talking about is like sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. And
what and why and how to share.
and then, I mean, that's where it's the most obvious, because it's like, that's my job. My job is being creative in many ways. And that's how I've provided for myself for like almost 2 decades now. But like, it's the same thing with making new friends and just like all of that stuff. You just go through these things of like, where you can find yourself looking through some strange prism of like someone else's eyes that you're making up in your head that doesn't even exist. Like most of the time it's just all good vibes, and your head, the part of you that has struggled and dealt with trauma or whatever wants to project some other scene on the silence. You send a text, you're not hearing back, your brain fills in all the things that the other person is thinking, and you're like, whoa, what did I do to deserve this? And all it is they're just living their life.
Yeah.
They're just not, there's no this, but we can all get wrapped up in that. And I think for me, that stuff just makes me feel super uncomfortable in my being, and I don't like dealing with it. So I think a lot of my psychedelic work was around that, but deeper, into maybe like where the entry wound was, and like going into like childhood stuff and figuring out like, where did like the insecurity really like blossom, and all that kind of stuff. And it's just amazing what certain experiences can show you. I mean, I got a lot of clarity, and I think I got a lot of healing through LSD, through MDMA, and through ayahuasca. Those are the ones that kind of gave me these huge breakthroughs. And then, with mushrooms, that's always been more of a like almost like a specialty experience for me, where it's like way more of a like dealer's choice kind of situation where, like I can go to the other ones with these very specific things I want to work on, and it can really, depending on which tool you use, it's like it can really knock it out of the park, and it's just like extremely effective therapeutic experience. With
Can you think
mushrooms,
of a
different.
particular experience you had on one of those medicines where it did what you're talking about that you'd be willing to share?
Sure, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So there's a few, but I would say ayahuasca specifically was probably the most mind-blowing, where it was like I went actually I went with Michael Phillip of Third Eye Drops. We went to Peru together, and we did 5 ceremonies over the span of like 9 days or something like that. And right off the top, that thing I was describing, that imposter syndrome, and that whole like, am I really an artist? Am I really doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Like all this kind of kind of like big question type stuff was just like revealed to me in the most elegant and spectacular way ever in the first ceremony. It was just like, it was like absolutely incredible. So basically I wound up having this vision right away. The first dose of ayahuasca for me was like the most powerful thing I'd ever experienced. Like it was
Yeah.
just like I got sucked into this crazy portal vortex that just kind of went into all this like 8-bit kind of vibe with hypercolor and all the stuff you hear about. But then I just was so blown away by how like synesthesic the whole experience was. And without me really, yeah, I didn't really say anything, but it started to give me this narrative that was essentially answering my quandaries, and so all of a sudden I just see this. I see myself, and I'm nodding, and I'm just like hypnotically, like I can see myself from outside myself. I'm looking at myself, and I'm just so immersed in the Icaros, and like the music is just like completely inside of my body, and this nod is the only thing I can do. And all of a sudden, so I'm looking at myself nodding, and it just ripples out like this film strip, just thousands of frames of me. But every single like every single frame is a different moment in my life of me nodding like this, and every different age, going like all the way back to like being a child and like sitting there by myself nodding, and people being like, "Are you hearing music? Like what do you? Why are you nodding?" And like I'm just like I'm like overwhelmed with this feeling of like it was kind of like time all of a sudden reversed, and it was like my whole life had been pulling me towards this moment, like every single nod in my entire life was nodding along to these Icaros that was happening in real time. And
Across time of one time. Yeah.
yes, but it said something to me like just so it was so powerful, because it felt like it like verified my existence in some way. It was like, yo, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, and this nod is like part of your being. It's been like this transmission that you've been getting all along, and we're just gonna continue to send you along in your little merry nod.
It's the
But
cosmic
like,
nod.
yes, so
Yeah.
that's that actually came out of like an integration session later when I was sitting there with Michael, and Michael was just like, dude, the cosmic nod. He's like, that's your pod. And then we just both died because of the rhyme, and I was just like, actually, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a great story. It's amazing how it's almost like in those experiences, there's those things that happen that essentially are like synchronistic, or there's a concrescence of meaning that is so profound that's why it's so powerful. Is because it's everything about it is so true and right and perfunctory and just amazing and all of it. And in some ways, it's like synchronicity in our own life in this three-dimensional reality is some kind of there's some kind of connective tissue there too.
Yes.
And it's sort of it's just much more mundane only because we don't have we have a certain chemical situation going through this nervous system, and we put that other chemical situation going on with ayahuasca or whatnot. Now it's like your antenna is like you just put nitrous in it. It's like, wow, look what I can pick up now. It's like, so I mean, what an amazing thing. I mean, what role has synchronicity played for you as a way of? I'm totally going down the rabbit hole of like all the like psychedelic hippie questions, which isn't always my thing. But I find myself interested in this, and is a way of like confirmation or playfulness, or almost maybe the opposite. You know, what role does that play in the integration of these experiences for you?
Well, it's funny because like right now I'm looking up in my little office here, which is still not completely set up because we moved in just a few months ago, and it's been like, hodgepodging it all together. But I'm looking up at this stuffed octopus. It's not like, it's like a stuffed animal toy, but it's kind of this reminder of this extremely intense experience that I had with psilocybin and synchronicity within the trip involving octopi and chameleons. And it was like, it literally, it changed everything in my life. Like I went into, so basically had this insane, profound synchronicity within this experience that then just continued for months, like months. I was having upwards of like a dozen really pronounced octopi synchronicities a day that felt extremely communicative. And there were times where I was actually pretty scared. It felt like I was communicating with some kind of extremely powerful,
octopus.
Like an extraterrestrial, essentially.
They could be extraterrestrial. What was that movie? Arrival, I think. Yeah, and you could kind of see them, and they basically look like octopus. Yeah, from another dimensional planet.
Yeah, but that movie is actually a great touchstone. I mean, I think because it really, I think there is something to like retrocausality, and I really think that I get a hint of that in almost every psychedelic experience, like this reminder of it, that the way we normally perceive time is just perverted and not accurate.
I get chills just like thinking, because I'm thinking about that moment in the movie. I'm just remembering, like at the end, which he sort of sees the what is he, a doctor or something? The other guy, the Asian, I think he was. Anyway, but it's that thing where they look each other's eyes. Yeah, like it's something that they say, and there's a remembrance, almost like something about that, and the two of them, almost in essence, like a choice being made that now the creation of the universe can happen. Yeah, with these just two people, a kind of recognition, and how utterly psychedelic and beautiful I remember that moment being in the film.
Truly. Yeah,
amazing,
it's really
music
beautiful.
Too.
If anyone hasn't seen it, I would really recommend it. And if you have seen it and you don't recall what's special about it, then go watch it again. It's really great.
I want to see it again now.
Yeah.
And Johansson did the music to that.
Yes.
And I remember it being otherworldly as well and really creative. But the synchronicity you had, I mean, would it make sense to tell us, or is it too sacred? Or I mean, that's totally cool.
No, it's one of those things where, like one of the things I often giggle about these synchronistic experiences is that they're so difficult to explain.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And especially when they compound on each other. when they just keep happening and keep happening, and it almost feels like there's a code that is being developed over time because they're starting to reference themselves, right? But like, essentially what happened was my bandmates and I, we all took psilocybin on a beach in Hawaii, and except for one member decided they were going to basically take one for the team and go out that night and spend time with the people that gave us the mushrooms so that we didn't have to be around them while we were tripping. And so when he left us, I told him, keep your channels open, or something to that, like, I'm going to be sending you messages. And so without getting into extreme detail, like, I can actually give you a podcast to reference if anyone wants the full story, they can check it out. But just the cliff notes is, while we were, in the peak, first hour or two, we start to have these extremely strange, kind of mild synchronistic things happen with the mentioning of an octopus. And then we lost my friend Anthony, who sings for our band. We lost him. We were all kind of concerned for him. Then we wound up finding him on the beach, and he's like, "Oh, you couldn't see me? I was right here all this time. I was hanging out with this little squid guy over there." And like, he told us about how, like, this little baby octopus or baby squid was like swimming around in this little spot over by the rocks. And as he was telling us that, me and our bass player Nick had actually been talking about octopus. We were talking about octopi in another side conversation where we were basically trying to keep ourselves occupied. So I start to tell him, "Oh, I heard this story about how cephalopods like might have come from outer space." I was just kind of telling him this thing, and I was like, "It's because of their RNA, because they can change it on the fly, and that's why they can change color." And then he's like, "Yeah, but like, what about chameleons? Don't they do that too?" And I was like, "Oh, I guess they do." Yeah. So then it was just kind of like falling apart, this like, oh, I was trying to create this whole like mystical mythos for cephalopods, and then he like burst the bubble with the chameleon thing. Then we talked to Anthony. He tells us the thing about the squid guy. Like, okay. So we get back to the house that we were all sharing. Finally, the other guy that was not tripping with us, but who I told to keep his satellites open or whatever, he comes back, and we're like, we're probably like 3 to 4 hours deep at this point, so we're kind of back, but still feeling it. And we're all excited for him to come back, and he comes in, and we're like, "What'd you do?" He's like, "Oh, I got some stuff for T, his daughter." And we're like, "What did you get?" And so he pulls out a little stuffed chameleon, and we're just like, and the deeper part of this is that the day before, there was a weird synchronicity that happened with Nick, the guy who popped my bubble with the chameleon fact. And he's like the skeptic, basically. And like, so he had a synchronicity, and I was like, "What do you think the synchronicities are all about?" And he's like, "I don't think they're about anything. They're just like coincidence, He's like, "It would be cool, if it meant something else, but I don't think it does." So that was the day before this all happened. And so he pulls out, other guy pulls out the stuffed chameleon, and Nick and I look at each other like, "What the fuck?" Like, another one? And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "But check it out." And then he gives it to me, and I read the tag, and it says, "Hi, I'm Colin the chameleon. Please take care of me." And I was like, "What the hell?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "The weird thing is," he's like, "I had this other one that I was going to buy prior to this, and I was in line. I saw it. And then when I noticed that it said your name, I felt like I had to buy it." He's like, "But I couldn't put the other one down, so I bought that too." And I'm just like, "Oh no." And then like he reaches in and he pulls out this like stuffed octopus. And then
Yeah.
like me and the other guy
No
just
way.
lost our minds, just like crying. And I was like, I knew
Well,
it.
it's perfect too, like when you're coming down like that in a sense,
Yeah.
because it's like that's the cosmic nod.
Yes.
And what is so strange about synchronicity is that sometimes it's, if you're lucky in a sense, because it's such a gift, it can be so profound that it's
Yeah.
like slapping you across the head. But
Yeah.
then also, it can be
So
so
subtle.
meaningless in a way. But like, for instance, I was in a park last summer and there was a hat in a tree, and my girlfriend brought us there, and I said, "Yeah, I need a new hat. This reminds me." She's like, "Well, there's a hat in the tree." I'm like, "Well, clearly someone lost that. I don't want to take their hat." It's like, it's not like my name's in it. Pulled it out of the tree, and written in it says Trevor, which is my birth name.
Wow.
But it's also just so stupid. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, so I took the hat. I'm like, all right, I'll take the hat. But it's like,
Yeah.
what does that mean for my life? I don't know. Nothing. I don't know. But in some ways, like your buddy, the skeptic,
Yeah.
there is a choice to be made with synchronicity. You actually must choose it to be so. And that is
Yes.
not bad or good. I
Yeah.
think that is the essence of the mechanism. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not right or wrong. It's like, well, you must decide that it's a synchronicity. And the skeptic says, well, then that's what makes it not one. And I say, that's what makes it is one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing because so as that continued for a long time, and got louder and louder at times and really freaky. My wife would even attest to this. She got sucked into it as well, and it started messing with her, and it was like this really strange thing that we just sort of did a dance with, and then it even returned after a year of being dormant, came back again, and it's kind of become this little like wink that we have with the universe, I guess. I always kind of like cringe a little bit saying, the universe or whatever. That's so broad, but like,
What else do you say? I don't know.
I don't
know.
the all, whatever,
Yeah, whatever.
But
Great it.
yeah, I think the deepest lesson I would get, because for a long time I was so maniacally inside of this thing that I was following signs and jumping on planes and going to random events that it was pointing me towards and like stuff like that. Like it was like a real like Pee-wee's Adventure with the octopus or something, But the only thing I would ever be left with that felt true was this understanding, a deeper understanding of duality, and how you really can't fully subscribe to either one of those parties that you just described, or at least I can't, because all of a sudden it's like the magic just leaves one way or the other. Because if I just am like, yeah, duh, magic exists, it's cool, like for me that doesn't work, because it makes me almost numb to it and take it for granted, or often I'll find myself in this weird spiral of kind of like self-doubt, or feeling like it's all just an illusion, and it can make me feel like it makes me question reality just a little bit too much, to the point where it's distracting me from just like living.
It's like the imposter syndrome of being a human.
Yeah,
Right?
pretty much. Yeah, I mean, it's really important, I find, to kind of sit in the center, in this place of sort of discomfort, where you don't have an answer. You just have sort of the pixie dust or the sand, however you want to see it. And for me, I like the duality of being able to flip the card back and forth and see both. Like I see it as both nothing and also everything. And for me, that feels the most potent. Even though I've gone through phases of both, I've gone through phases of like feeling completely, I guess I would call it agnostic. You know, that's sort of where I sit, I guess. But like almost like points of like atheist almost vibes where I'm like everything is meaningless. So I guess that's almost like nihilism. You know, like just
Yes.
just it's all chaos. You know, but then I can completely go hard extreme opposite of that and feel like everything is interconnected, everything is magical, everything is destiny. I mean, like I could go to either polarity.
Well, if doesn't synchronicity though show you a kind of connection as opposed to total chaos? It's sort of almost proof. It's like, well, that is not just total chaos. I mean, in chaos things bump into each other, but the point being when it's happening with a kind of repetition, it's showing you some form of, shall I say, design or interactivity.
So I guess I would say that the part of me that's a skeptic would sit there and tease that out and be like, it's still really fascinating, but I almost see it more as, well, yes, I guess it still would imply design, and that would still be mystical. But it's almost like, so here's the thing, that the dilemma that would constantly run up against when I was in these like weird synchronistic vortexes of like, but okay, if this is implying intelligence, whose intelligence is it implying? And like, is there intention behind it, right? And that question I would spin inside a lot. And then that's sort of where I would tend to lean more towards this misunderstanding of time thing, where I think that answers a lot of these questions, in that there doesn't need to be some grandiose intelligent being orchestrating these synchronicities to send messages, versus, you know, what feels more elegant to me is that retrocausality thing, where synchronicities are kind of a function of our minds perceiving time the correct way, which is kind of the opposite direction. Therefore, you know, synchronicity is part of the mechanism of binding, which is sort of like the way we perceive reality to happen. You know, oh, I'm choosing to pick up this thing, or was I destined to pick up this thing? Right? I pick up this can of flavored water, or, you know, did I just choose that, or was that already pre-written? Right? And the reason why I started leaning more and more towards this like time perception thing is because when I would be in like extremely intense psychedelic experiences, anything I did felt synchronistic, where it was like, oh, I'd pick up this thing. Why does this feel like a synchronicity? Why am I getting this pulsation of like synchronicity when all I did was pick up this flavored water? And I think what it is like, you know, there's all this like research that basically says so many of our decisions are already made before we consciously recognize that we've, you know, are choosing them. So I just think that there's some like a lot of like mysticism is like, you know, stuff that we just don't have science for yet. But there is like groundwork for it.
But science in a way could be like another way of saying cause and effect, which is a kind of design in a sense that like just everything influences other things, just the way like my hand moving through air. And dare I say on a quantum level, but my point is, I mean, that's a thing, you know, and I don't want to use
Q word. Yeah. Oh my God.
I hate it when some people do, because it's sort of like an excuse. Totally feel you.
But I think you're using it correctly, actually. I think I totally understand what you're saying. And I totally, yes.
Like synchronicity is just, you're seeing cause and effect, which is always there. It's sort of ways where it pops up to be quite noticeable to you in sort of ways that, but what's even crazier, man, is like somehow where the ways are not just like I push this and that other thing moves, but it's I push this, that other thing moves, and that's incredibly funny. Or, and that's incredibly touching. Or it's like, it's like, oh my God, you just hit me with my blind spot. That's the
Right.
kind of stuff where it's like you feel a part of the larger it. You talked about like who is the one with the intention. I almost
Yes.
say like, well, it's
Yes.
also, what is the thing with the
Yes.
intention? It's beyond the what and the who, but you're part
Hmm.
of that. It's
Yes.
sort of like, oh, my decisions and choices somehow are connected to this, yet my destiny exists, yet
Yeah.
maybe it's just like nihilistically deterministic and
Yeah.
maybe all of it. And that's like, I have a phrase I like to kick around for myself that we have a destiny, but we have to choose it. And it's sort
Mm.
of like a koan. It's like, well, what does that even mean? It doesn't,
Yes.
and like, I don't know, but it rings true for me.
Hmm.
And it's true that things are quite deterministic, but I also know in my heart that for some reason it seems to matter on a really big level what I
Hmm.
choose, even to my thoughts. Like it's somehow it sounds egotistical, but I
Hmm.
mean all of us, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like our choices matter, and they're not just that, but they're needed. Yet we're flowing through this destiny of one moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And I think the further away I am from these experiences, the more I'm able to allow this skeptic to take up some residency in my mind, which I'm fine with. It's okay. It's a part of me. But during those moments where those things happen, there is no questioning. Like there is only
Yeah.
knowing, and it reverberates through my entire body and my being.
Yeah.
So it's funny. I've just had so many of those things happen where I get this feeling that there is like an intelligence and there is a design and that there is you know magic, for lack of a better word. But it's interesting how, and it's similar to psychedelics as well. Like I would say, because a lot of my synchronicities are usually, I wouldn't say always directly after psychedelic experiences, but there's usually some closeness.
Yeah, maybe like those experiences, in essence, they're kind of clearing away the fat or clearing away the noise,
Hmm.
maybe a better way to look at it. So it's just easier. Your antenna just got cleaned off a bit, and it's like everything's a little bit, easier to pick up those different radio frequencies. The stations are a little cleaner, or there's ones that's like, ooh, there's a subtle one in between those two stations. I never heard that before.
Exactly. I mean, it's like there's just so much sense when it comes to, like, when I actually do examine them. It's like, oh, well, they really kick up. Psychedelics or not, they kick up a lot in transitional periods. So
Yeah,
whenever I'm about to have like a major shift in my life, whether I'm moving or some kind of big, next phase in a creative cycle or whatever, like that's usually where these major ones happen, and they feel really meaningful
yeah,
because
yeah,
they're not just this like, oh, that's cute. They can be,
yeah,
but it's kind of like a sick lyric in a song that you find yourself repeating over and over again, and then it turns out that when you go and read the lyrics, that it's actually something completely different, but it's exactly what you needed to read in that very moment. And it's like, I get that feeling quite often with these kind of synchronicities, where I can look at them at face value and be like, huh, that's really fucking weird, or that's really fucking cool, or that's neat, or whatever, as my friend Nick would say. But like, all I have to do is peel one layer of the onion back and then look at what could this possibly be saying to me. Then it gets really interesting. And that's when I
yeah,
try to, even if I am not wholesale buying every aspect of it is some message from, God or the all, I'm like, is this, now let's go back to the idea that I am God and I am the all, what am I trying to communicate to myself here? Because I think quite often that's where I find myself with this is like, it's just like a ping pong match with myself where, I'm sending messages back and forth through time
to grow, right?
Yeah.
Or to I've also come across this idea of it being that cosmic game of peekaboo,
Yeah.
where like you look at a baby and you play the game of peekaboo, and all that's happening there is them being so quickly forgetting and remembering in a sense. And you could say that's what the soul's journey is to forget, and the joy, just the pure joy of remembering, like just like a baby. It is so joyful to say, you're there again.
Yep.
And if that's essentially an analogy for what's going on, then if the other side of the veil, if we call it the soul, is, then in some ways everything is meaningful. But meaningful can also mean just for joy or just for experience. Like in essence, the game of peekaboo is just to have experience as opposed to a plenum of non-experience, because it's loving. It's something to do. It's because you get to discover the amazement of essentially consciousness and aliveness. And so in that way, it's not a bad thing that like everything, it's not heavy to think that everything has meaning. It's more like, it's just that rich.
Yeah.
Even the stuff that feels like it's silly. It's like, maybe it's just silly.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just rough. And then maybe that gets into all sorts of things of like, if that is true, then we're like this little tip of an iceberg above the ocean connected to this giant pyramid of incarnation and meaning and causality that is far beyond anything I could ever try to imagine, like how far the roots of the tree go. And it's really, truly connected to everything that's ever happened. And in that case, when I think about cause and effect, I'd think, like that would make sense why there's a lot of work to do. Like a lot of choices have been made for millions of years, perhaps trillions, and across the universes. That this is just where the cookies crumbled, and it's we've made a lot of crazy choices, and now we're kind of dealing with the cause and effect, and that maybe is what the battle of love and evil is in a sense. Or
Sure.
I mean, I'm going far down the metaverse rabbit hole of philosophy. Sorry, but
It's cool. I'm there with you.
But so your Octopus. It's funny when you said it, because my last album I released is made to design a psilocybin journey, and it's called In. And one of the tracks on it, all the tracks have titles like Ground, Jesus Christ, Sovereign, and they're kind of just one word, sort of open ended. But one of them has a name, and then in parentheses, the title is Octopus Spaghetti Pants, and that's because for me, that song evokes a feeling that I sometimes often feel with mushrooms, where things are starting to break down, and particularly language, and my brain just starts shooting words around that don't even make sense. And like the phrase octopus spaghetti pants gets thrown in there, and it's a representation of like dimensional boundary or something. Yeah. And I was talking to Peter Broderick, this other musician, and he saw that temp title, and he's like, you have to use that temp title, because it's so weird. And so when you said octopus and psilocybin, I'm like, octopus, man.
Yeah. You know what? Eventually, probably like a year after, like the peak of that whole time, a friend of mine sent me. So there was definitely, obviously you can't have a synchronistic vortex of octopi synchronicities without McKenna getting drug into it. But of course, there was multiple things dealing with McKenna, Terrence, and about a year later, my friend who actually was one of the only people that was so fascinated by my experiences, he wanted to hear every single one. So I would report to him, and he was like tracking it.
I would log them into the Akashic record.
Yeah. Well, he's like a very very kind of like dedicated DMT self researcher, and finds all this stuff really fascinating. And So he was really into my whole, like, tracking my whole synchronistic thing. And he winds up talking to a lot of different people in like the Terrence McKenna Facebook groups and other, random psychedelic groups, and asking questions and comparing stories. And he winds up talking to this guy who wound up being one of Terrence's good friends, and they had a pen pal relationship for a long time. And he just sends me out of nowhere one day. It was this letter that this guy had received from Terrence, and it had this letterhead on it, which was an octopus, but with like in the heads were in shapes of mushrooms, and it was actually addressed from Hawaii, and like I was just like, of course,
Do you not
like,
eat octopus at this point? I mean,
no.
did you before? Yeah.
I actually haven't. So I've been vegan for a few years, but even prior to that, this is another weird thing. I've only had calamari once my entire life, and it was when I was actually a vegetarian. My girlfriend at the time. Now that I repeat this story, it sounds kind of cruel, but she like tricked me into eating calamari, like because I asked her what it was, and she just like, oh, it's just pasta. So I was like eating it, and I was like, this tastes
This is
really
some
weird.
weird ass pasta.
Yeah. But I then got really sick, like on the streets of New York, threw up the calamari like on the street.
Oh.
And she's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, why are you sorry? She's like, well, that wasn't just pasta, and I was like, well, I don't think that's why I threw up. Like, I don't know, that's weird. And I never really thought about it until the whole octopus thing. And I was like, whoa, that's strange.
Have you ever since then gotten any downloads in the psychedelic space, like with an entity or beings that are representational through an octopus?
Yes. So
What do they have to say?
So it was actually quite beautiful. So when I was, this happened, all this stuff happened, I want to say like a little less than 2 years before I went to Peru and did ayahuasca. And when I was preparing to go to Peru, I was going to see actually two therapists, but one specifically an underground psychedelic therapist who I was doing integration prep work essentially with. So she taught me about internal family systems therapy and a bunch of other really interesting Gestalt kind of style therapies. And when I was like, one of the first things I brought up was like, listen, I have this weird thing with an octopus, specifically. I encountered this strange synchronicity, and I told her the whole story. But then I said that now it's starting to occupy this space in my mind of like an entity, like this almost like god-like extraterrestrial like being that I feel like is sort of waiting for me, in the void. And I said I'm like a little nervous about it, like if I'm gonna encounter this thing when I'm with ayahuasca. So we did a lot of work around it. And, I went there and I had pretty successfully turned my fear into curiosity. I think that was really the main thing that needed to happen was I needed to hear this thing out if I encountered it. And I need to not project all this fear onto it if that's what's going to happen. Right. So, I think like, it was night 2 that I went in kind of cocky because I had like the best night 1 ever. It was like the most, was like the most profound. Like night 1 was just like, cosmic nod. I purged, but it was like so like one and done, like just good. The whole thing was, I felt like I was on a rocket ship, like hanging on from outside, and I successfully made it to my destination without falling off the rocket ship. And it just felt like, woohoo, all right, let's go deeper again. So, bigger dose, and just really, I went straight to hell, like just had really difficult time. Spun off of just unfortunate, did not I underestimated the impact of needing to pee. I drank a lot of water prior, and then the medicine hit me like a ton of bricks, and I had to pee really bad, but I was like paralyzed. I could not move. So like the whole ceremony, I felt it basically zoomed out and became this huge ordeal where I really like the normal like earthbound me knew I needed to pee really bad,
Yeah.
but I split into a bunch of different characters in
Oh
my
my
head.
God.
And it was like, you're not going to get up. You're going to make a fool out of yourself. You're going to trip over people. You're never going to make it to that bathroom. So don't even bother. And then another voice that's like, you're going to do internal organ damage to yourself right now. And
You're
then,
dying.
So yeah. So all these things were going around. And then I basically had the part of me that is so proud and won't ask for help. That's all I had to do was raise my hand, ask for help. Somebody would have brought me to the
But yeah, sure,
bathroom.
dude.
Yeah, like there's so many people there that would have just helped me, but I would not. I refused, and I dug in, and I was having this whole dialogue in my head, and one of my parts was just like, "Nope, not gonna happen. I'm just gonna sit here," and it turned into this psychodrama where I don't know. I don't think anyone directly said this to me, but this is what I was understanding. The deal was that the entire universe was going to explode if I couldn't get over my ego and ask for help. So it was kind of like this deal that
It is
God,
kind of a pretty profound lesson.
yes,
I mean,
God had made this deal with me. If you don't ask for help, the whole fucking thing is going down. And I just dug in my heels and I was like, fuck it. Let it burn, baby. Like I'm not getting up. So I went through this like severe punishment, horrible trip. Just really was in hell. And 6 hours later, I'm still going so hard. Like Michael's like, "Are you okay, man?" Like I couldn't stand. I could not speak. And everyone else was back already. And like the night before, it was like 4 hours, like on the dot. I was back. I was fine. This were like 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. I was deeply like I was tripping face still at hour like 10, 11. Wow. I didn't go back to our bungalow that night. I asked Michael to stay with me for a little bit longer until I felt like, okay, I'm not dying. But so he went away, and I had this just super weird night in the ceremony house. There were some people that just wind up staying there. Either they're feeling the medicine still, or they just want to be in the space.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't move, so I stayed there, and I just start having. I think because there was a pool outside, the lights they started looking kind of like your background right now, but like on the ceiling of the ceremony house, and I'm all of a sudden I'm just like underwater, and I just see this enormous octopus above me, and I'm like, of course, now you're here, great, and I perceived to have this just the most moving, extremely powerful like teaching like happening with me and this octopus. It was like I felt like I had died, and I was in this weird kind of no man's land, this like void where like even though there were still people in the ceremony house, like they had disappeared to me, and I was in it by myself, and I was just in this void by myself of like just echoing meanness forever and nothing else. And then all of a sudden I see this octopus, and it was like my response was like not of fear, but of like excitement that there's another being there. Mm-hmm. And I start having this connection with it, and it's super like gentle, but like kind of stern. And it just was like telepathically telling me like, this is how it feels like to be me. Like, and it's kind of like this entity that had been, this thought form that had been cast into this weird void by itself, that I had done to it. And it like gave me this beautiful appreciation for just other beings that I get to share experience with, you know? And like I had never felt more understood or like held, or like it was like I needed help so badly. And it was only like moments before I saw this thing that I legitimately had asked for help for the first time in the whole ceremony. Like I asked Michael for help, and then just a few moments later I get this like super
It's an
crazy
opening. Yeah.
download. Yeah. And as I explained that the next day, to the shaman, like he was just like, you know, this this is like one of like your greatest teachings that you need to like absorb, like this is not just a random thing. Like the prolonging of that experience that you felt, the fact that it wouldn't let you go until you took this lesson, there's something really big and valuable there. And I was still like kind of like shook when I was explaining this at the integration the next day, and
Sure.
because I was realizing, oh, there's another ceremony coming up, you know. And I'm like, am I gonna sit this out or what? And I just like knew instantly, like I have to go back in tonight, like I have to. And that's not like advice. That's not psychedelic advice for anyone, like if you feel a reason that you shouldn't, you shouldn't. But that's not what I was feeling. I was just feeling this like kind of dilemma of like, okay, I've just been put through hell. I didn't feel like I was in danger, but I just felt like that was really rough. Do I really want to risk that
Yeah,
again?
just shell shocked for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I decided, I think that this medicine is one, it's like a tricky one where it's literally like it can traumatize you, but it can also be exactly the only thing that can untraumatize you. So it's really interesting in that way. And that night, when I went back in for ceremony 3, that was just like the most like angelic,
Oh, thank God.
closest to bliss I had ever
Thank
gotten in
God.
my entire life. Like just the most
The only thing
beautiful.
better was that amazing piss you had the night before at the end of the night.
Well, actually, that was part of my hell, is that as soon as I finally got up and peed, I felt zero relief. So that's why I was so scared. I started all this like creeping, like, oh my God, like I'm getting punished for my, like how prideful I was, and I'm never going to be able to experience relief or joy again. This is like my punishment. But like, but yeah, eventually the next day when I could pee like a normal person, that was pretty nice. But yeah, night 3, absolute bliss. And I haven't really had a direct like visual encounter with the octopus ever since that. But in some strange way, I had a guided MDMA journey, like I want to say a little over a year ago, and that was probably equally as profound as any of this stuff, but just in a completely different way. And I was
Well, you're
having,
connected, you're connected now to that.
yeah,
And that kind of stuff is totally across time. It's not about how long it's been. It's about how much you pay attention. In some weird way, I feel like when your girlfriend gave you the calamari,
yeah,
it was needed to like create this connection. Like you needed
dude,
that
I
physical.
know.
It was
Needed
just
to
you
get
needed
it
a little
into
bit,
just a
a little
little
bit of DNA
DNA.
in you. Boom. Yeah, and then it's
Yeah.
like, okay, we got that done because we have some work to
Yeah.
do later. We've made a deal.
Totally, dude. Totally. Yeah, I mean, very, very interesting. But like when I did MDMA, and I felt like I was having sort of like a download situation happening, and felt like, so, in my ayahuasca ceremonies, I eventually encountered sort of like an angel of sorts, and I felt instantly reconnected to that angelic presence when I took MDMA, and I knew it was the same one. And as I was just getting just tons and tons of this like beautiful, healing, and pretty dense information. There was like this sense that I say she just because it felt feminine, but like that she was like with my octopus. It was like this really weird knowing that they were
That's beautiful.
there together. So they feel like my guides. If there are guides, I feel
Hell
like
yeah.
I've met a couple of them at this point.
Well, it's not bad to have an octopus as a power animal, spirit
Yeah.
animal. I like that, man. Haven't heard that
Yeah.
one before.
Yeah.
Wow, I really appreciate all your vulnerable sharing and stories. I mean, it's something about maybe the podcast medium, but I kind of like getting to know people through a podcast because
Yeah.
for some people it's a way to like at least on my part, really listen, but also for people to be able to be seen and speak. So I thank you for just taking an avenue and letting us go down it like that. That's great. I hope we can go down more again sometime.
Of course, man. Anytime.
Yeah, and I hope that weather is as always good as it looks like behind you. And
It's a little chillier here, unfortunately, but
yeah, here too.
Looking forward to the spring whenever it gets here.
Cool, man. Well, how can people? What's the best way to link up with you? Because I did this, and there are a couple different things going on out there. So, what do you prefer to share?
Any way is fine. I will say like email's probably the best for me. Colin Circa at Gmail, and that's Colin with one L. You can find me pretty easily at Colin Circa on all the social media stuff, and my email's linked to all those places. DMs are fine too, but there's just so much kind of junk to sift through. It's for me, it winds up being a lot more difficult to maintain good communication that way. So if you actually want to talk to me, for sure, you want to make sure you want to get in touch with me, definitely send me an email.
Just go to the beach, take some psilocybin, find an octopus.
Yeah.
That's how you can talk.
Just speak with your mind. I will hear you.
Well, thank you, Colin. It's fun.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, for coming on the show and for taking the time to say hello and get to know each other. I think you're awesome. I hope to talk to you again. This song that you're hearing in the background is called Niños, and it is from the album Held, which I just got back off of a label. And so, I don't know, that feels kind of good. It's like holding it a little bit closer. It got to come home. But I really love this album, and I love this song a lot. This was all recorded on my Charles Walter piano right after I got it, and I was just wanted to make a straight piano record. And the Niños for me is the name of the Niños Santos, another way of saying the little children, the mushroom spirit of our lower Americas. And this song, I don't know, it felt like some kind of energy of that. Not like in the traditional Journey music way, but like some sort of innocence and lightness, wisdom and playfulness. So this is from the album Held. Thanks again to everyone on our East Forest Council that is on Patreon. And thank you for everyone who helped spread the word and for reviewing the podcast. All right, guys, just keep your head on straight and your heart open. And just keep walking that walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do it with grace.